Hey guys, Cody here with Hardhead Veterans. Today I'm here with Antonio from Com Gear Supply, and today we're going to talk about the basics of communication gear. So Antonio, tell me a bit about yourself.
So I've been with Com Gear for about 10 years. I've been in the communication industry for about 20. I've had a background in audio engineering, and my initial exposure to communication equipment was as a reservist field radio operator for the United States Marine Corps.
Okay, so I was in the infantry for 6 years, and the only thing that we really learned how to do was to program them and push to talk. And besides that, that's all I really know when it comes to radios. So since you're an expert, how does communication gear work?
Well, there's a couple different ways to explain it. The easiest way is if you think about it in the sense of a tin can telephone. So if you have a tin can telephone and it has infinite lines, and your buddy down the road has a tin can telephone as well, or a radio for this example, then he's going to be able to listen to you and talk back to you. Mm-hmm. If you wanted to go further distances, you take that cable and you put it on a tower or repeater, and that allows you to propagate your signal or that cable to further longer distances, wider crowds. And in contrast, it'll be good to think about your cell phone network like a spider web, where the users are on the outside. Or for example, if I wanted to send you a message, I can't do that end to end to your device. I have to enter in this web of network that's controlled by other corporations and companies, and they have their own infrastructure. And the issue with that is if something goes down, if that system gets overwhelmed, then I can no longer communicate to you the way that I was able to.
Yeah. All right, Antonio, so what do we need? What gear do we need to get started if we need communication gear?
So first and foremost, you're going to want a radio, and you want to kind of stick with your base knowledge. So if you're new to radios, you don't need to go out and spend $200-$300. You can actually go out to Walmart and buy FRS radios. These radios don't have removable antennas. They have preset channels, and there's no license required at all to operate them. You just simply pop them out of the box, and this is what you'll find when people go on road trips, camping, hunting, that sort of activity. Then the next layer to that is a radio like this. Here we have a Baofeng radio as an example, but this is what is considered a ham or an amateur radio. Now at this level, you do need an operator's license. You take a test, and that gives you the ability to transmit on this type of radio. But also keep in mind that you're able to receive without a license. So if you go out and you buy a radio and you haven't gotten your license yet, you can fire it up and you can listen to transmissions and get to know the radio that way. And the other level is a GMRS radio. Now this is somewhat of a step up from the FRS. This you don't have to take an exam for, but you do pay for licensing, and you pay the FCC a fee of between $35 and $70, and they will give you an allotted frequencies for 10 years.
Okay. And what's the cost difference between this and one of the higher end radios? Or even the ones at Walmart?
So the ones at Walmart, FRS radios, you're gonna start at around $40 to $50. And they're just gonna be basic function. You're not gonna be able to extend the range by going onto repeaters or anything like that. And you step it up to a radio like this, where you may actually end up paying less. So you can find Baofeng radios for as low as $20, $30. And it will have the function set that you'd expect from a $200 radio.
Okay. And so now that we've covered the radios themselves, what other gear would we need to make these function?
So the radios are gonna be able to function standalone, but in order to tap into external microphones or headsets, you're gonna need an interface. So more than likely, there's going to be a connection point on radios. Here on this one, it's on the side as well. And then from here, you would need to determine what your application, what your use for the radio is. Mm-hmm. If you're gonna be hunting, that's gonna be a different set of accessories than, let's say, if you're gonna be doing tactical training or something like that.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so now that we've gone over the different types of radios from different tiers, say the normal two-way radio up to GMRS and on up, what's the gear that we might need to either make more use of it or to help us in our daily operation?
Great question. So with that, it's just going to depend on the overall radio application, your intended use. But you would connect your audio accessory to the side. It's pretty standard for all two-way radios to come with a port for mic, headset, speaker mic, whatever it may be. So depending on that, you'll move on to a headset or a connector system like this that allows you to incorporate, let's say, like a standard mic for patrol and earpiece. But then the system also allows you to incorporate a push-to-talk system that will then allow you to plug in your tactical headsets, any type of hazmat gear for communication. So it all just mainly depends on what you want to do with the radio.
And I noticed that this one looks a little bit different. What's different between these two?
So first and foremost, this is going to be a law enforcement public safety radio. Radios like this are starting in the thousands. Radios like this, like I said, is around $20, $30. The abilities, the range, the frequencies this operates on is completely different than this radio. But in all, the purpose, the intent of communication technique is exactly the same way. It wants to be peer-to-peer, and if someone's too far, it connects to a tower, and then connects to a radio.
Okay, so we got Baofeng's and Harris radios here. What are some of the other brands that are out there that are popular right now?
So for amateur radio, you're going to find Baofeng, Hytera, Vertex, ICOM, Anytone, Yaesu. Those are going to be very, very popular, both in handheld and in mobile form, meaning this is going to be what you find in vehicle or on a side-by-side, something like that. And for law enforcement, you have brands like Harris, Motorola, Kenwood, E.F. Johnson, and those are going to be working off of a different connector system where amateur radios will mainly work off of a 2-pin connector. Law enforcement, public safety radios, and even military radios will work off of a multi-pin system, usually needing a side mount or a top mounted adapter.
Okay, so besides those differences, the way they connect right here with your push-to-talks and your headsets, what are some of the other differences between these brands, or is there any?
So it wouldn't be necessarily between the brands, but more so the function of the radio. So when you're looking at a public safety radio, the wattage, the output, how strong that signal, how far that string from tin can telephone can go out is much greater on a public safety radio than it is on an amateur radio.
Okay, so looking at this radio, I'm noticing that the connections are different. So my question is, are there different types of push-to-talk connections that work with different radios?
There's going to be one main popular connector, and that's going to be the one we have here. There's various names for it: TP120, U174, sometimes called the Nexus connector. But overall, it won't change. It's going to be this fat pin here with 3 black stripes. The thing to consider with those is that there are different wiring types. The 2 most popular one being NATO, which is used by the military, and another version which is simply known as civilian. Now this one is a bit of a misnomer because the civilian wiring can be used in public safety, and you find it in public safety all the time, but it is going to change the type of PTT you will use. The other thing to consider is the microphone element. There's electret and there's dynamic, and mostly when you have dynamic microphones, that's when you'll come across the need for what people call an amplified PTT. But having those 2 things essentially figured out, we'll be able to point you in the right direction for the PTT. Even if you don't have these things figured out or you don't know which wiring type, you can give us a call, and we usually try to troubleshoot it and can find out which wiring and which microphone type you have.
Okay, so how do you tell the difference between the NATO connection and the civilian connection?
So unfortunately, there is no visual way. They're going to be visually identical. The way that we go about it is we try to find out the manufacturer and the model. That's usually going to dictate. Some manufacturers stick to only NATO, some will go back and forth, some will only do civilian. And same goes for the mic element. The mic element is a bit tough to tell because when you're talking about boom mics, they're always going to be kind of a larger surface area. But same, manufacturers tend to stick to a certain type. So if you don't know, you can usually let us know the model and make, and we can determine which mic element you have.
Okay. Okay, so Antonio, so I just got my radio. Everything works. How do I keep everything working and functioning properly?
So one of the things you want to pay attention to the most is the battery. It's just naturally going to degrade, and you can do things to speed that process up. So you want to make sure that you maintain good battery power levels at all times. Never leave it charging, never leave it sitting on the charger for too long. Just basic things like that. And then there's, how you want to store the radio. You never want to leave it in a place where there's going to be moisture or dust. And if there is a risk of that, you're going to want to put it in some other type of enclosure to keep it separate from that type of environment.
Okay, so what do we do if any of our gear breaks?
So if you purchase your gear through ComGear Supply, there is a bit of peace of mind there. We partner with suppliers and manufacturers that don't just have a good reputation for quality, but for support as well. That's after support's extremely important to us. So all of our products come with at least a 12-month warranty. And some of our products, you're able to get an extended warranty that covers things like accidental drops, water damage, any kind of sort of damage that will come up in the line of gear that isn't normally covered. So we have your back on those sort of things. And when anything does go down and it's under warranty, you just reach back out to us and we try to get you new gear as soon as possible.
All right, so what do I do if I'm outside of that manufacturer warranty?
So from time, we do get requests for either repairs based on the item being out of warranty, something like that. It's rare for us to want to repair. We a lot of times consider that a pat's job, just depending on what the malfunction is on the gear. What we have done is issue a discount code, something around 20%, so that person can replace that gear as soon as possible and not really have to worry about getting it fixed a week out and then possibly having another issue 6 months, a year down the line.
So when I was in the Army, if we were going to use the radio, there were certain things that we weren't allowed to say or do. So what are some of those things as far as radio etiquette that you need to be aware of, whether you're in the military or not?
So one of the things that you primarily want to do is identify yourself. And in ham radio, you get issued a call sign. And when you initiate a transmission, you have to announce that call sign so everyone knows who's speaking at that time. So that's primarily going to be the first thing that is going to get called out if you don't transmit with a call sign if you're an licensed operator.
Okay.
Other things that you need to consider is which spectrum are you on? Are you on GMRS, FRS? Are you on ham radio? All that's going to depend on how you can address or how you should address people and how they would address you. Another thing to consider is imagine this being just like a public radio. You should not be prone to use foul language or anything offensive. Imagine that there's going to be kids listening, and a lot of times there is a lot of youth that are interested in ham radio and are active users. So that's one thing to consider whenever you're on there.
All right, so if I wanted to set this up for intergroup communications, what would I need to do?
So to set up a radio for your own frequencies and privacy tones, you can actually just do that on the face of the radio. And if there's an existing group with radios already and you want to join them, you can easily find out what frequencies they're operating on and if they have any privacy tones for receiving or transmitting. Now, if you don't have an existing group or you just got a bunch of radios and you're going to need to program them all, the easiest thing is going to be to use a computer, a programming software, and a loading cable. With that, you're able to, in one shot, program all the channels to the specific frequencies you want, both for receiving and transmitting, as well as privacy tones for receiving and transmitting.
Okay, so one of the questions I have, does the privacy code, does that make it so other people out that don't use that same privacy code, does it make it so that they can't communicate with you And are they still able to transmit on that main frequency that everyone is on?
So yes, the last part, you are able to essentially coexist on the same frequency and use different privacy tones. Now, if you don't have the privacy tone on, then yes, they are going to overlap.
Okay.
So the privacy tone, it's just a step in privacy, not a seal at all. Essentially, if we're on the same frequency and I have a privacy tone for receiving and or transmitting, you won't be able to hear or transmit on that frequency where I would. But if you just go over to your radio and pop in the frequency tone that it needs to be, you get granted access. It doesn't lock anybody out by any means.
So if I just got lucky, then that's
Exactly.
what happens. So it's not like full-blown encryption or something.
That's always one thing to keep in mind, that even though you may have your own set frequencies, your privacy tones, you could still theoretically be listened to much easier than if you were, had a scrambler or encryption.
Okay. Okay, so we all know that military and law enforcement need radios, and a lot of other applications, people need radios, say for search and rescue. But why does the average day normal American, why do they need radio, or why might they want it?
I think want is going to be the one to focus on here. And you don't never want to find yourself in a situation where you need a radio and don't have one. And being that they're so inexpensive and such a low price of entry, it's hard not to make that decision to own a radio. And you can look at owning a radio as just a point-to-point communication, and you can say, hey, I don't know anybody else with a radio. You can still get started. This works as a police scanner, fire scanner, anything public safety, public works, weather monitoring. So it isn't just a hub for you to talk to another individual. It's a utility tool, and that's something that gets often overlooked. It's extremely useful in emergency situations. Other potential uses for the radio would be if you're going out hunting in groups, camping, a lot of times when you're carpooling, having different lead car, rear car have radios is extremely beneficial. And just anything in between that you can think of, family events, going outings to a amusement park.
I mean, your road trips, I've told my family members, hey, we need to get radios. And then we get somewhere where we have no cell reception, and we're like, we need to stop because someone's got to use the bathroom or someone's going to throw up or something, and something comes up. And so if we had something like this, it would have just been a game changer for pretty much every situation. Okay, Antonio, so where can we buy all this gear?
So the radios and the radio accessories we offer at comgearsupply.com, but you may also want to check out local resources. A local radio shop will be able to offer more hands-on help, and also connecting you with local radio groups is going to be, it's going to help you go a lot further when you're just getting started in radios. But ultimately, we have a growing catalog at CommGear Supply. If you see something that we don't have and you believe we should have, we invite you to ask us. We always welcome that, whether it's radio brands or the accessories, whatever it is, we want to help you guys out any way we can.
Okay, so that was the basics of communication gear. So if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button with the bell notification turned on, and we'll see you next time.